Imagine this. It's a quiet fall evening in a small American town, the kind of town where everyone knows your name and strangers still wave at each other on the sidewalk. The streets are still wet from an earlier rain, and the crisp autumn air smells like burning leaves. Inside the town's public library, fluorescent lights hum softly as students cram for exams and elderly locals flip through newspapers. But at precisely 6:57 p.m., just 3 minutes before the library is scheduled to close, a 16-year-old girl named Marissa Caldwell walks out the front door. She waves goodbye to the librarian, adjusts the strap on her backpack, and steps into the evening mist, never to be seen again. That was 9 years ago. No phone call. No clue. Not a single trace. It's as if the night swallowed her whole. But just recently, a 13-second TikTok video posted by a complete stranger may have unraveled everything, and now, the investigation is wide open. Hey, you clicked on this video for a reason. Maybe you're into true crime. Maybe the words vanished and TikTok hit your algorithm. Or maybe you just have a gut feeling that there's more to this story than a typical missing persons case. Whatever brought you here, I want you to stay. Because what we're about to uncover isn't just another headline or viral mystery. It's a chilling story that will make you question how well we really know the people around us, how social media might be solving what traditional investigators missed, and how a teenager's final moments before disappearing may have been recorded in plain sight. If you've ever scrolled past a video and thought, wait, did I just see something strange? This story will hit you hard. And I promise you this, by the end of this video, you'll get the answer you came for. You're not going to walk away still wondering. You're here now, and you're going to get the whole truth. Let's talk about Marissa Caldwell. She wasn't the kind of girl who just up and left. She didn't have a history of running away. She wasn't mixed up with the wrong crowd, and according to everyone who knew her, teachers, classmates, even the crossing guard outside her school, she was dependable, grounded, and safe. She was the kind of teenager who color-coded her binders, volunteered at the animal shelter on weekends, and texted her mom when she was 5 minutes late. The day she vanished, Marissa had gone to the library to finish a paper on the civil rights movement. She texted her best friend to meet her later for milkshakes. She even set a reminder on her phone for a dentist appointment the next morning. All signs pointed to a normal day. And then nothing. Not a single security camera caught where she went after exiting the library. Her phone last pinged near the town's bus depot, but there were no passengers matching her description. No DNA. No tire tracks. No suspects. Just silence. And that silence lasted for nearly a decade. Now here's where things take a wild turn, and trust me, you're going to want to stick around for this. A few months ago, a teenage content creator from Portland named Ava Walsh uploaded a TikTok video that she never expected to go viral. It was a random late-night post, grainy footage of a woman in a roadside diner, with a caption that read, "Tell me this woman isn't giving kidnapped vibes." It was meant to be lighthearted. A trend. People do it all the time, spot someone acting strangely in public and turn it into entertainment. But this video? It wasn't funny. Within 48 hours, it had over 6 million views. And buried deep in the comments was one that changed everything. It simply read, "That looks like Marissa Caldwell. I used to go to high school with her." That one comment kicked off a wildfire. Within hours, armchair detectives flooded the thread. People started digging into old yearbooks, comparing facial features, watching the TikTok frame by frame. And you better believe, the internet did what the authorities hadn't been able to do in 9 years. It found a lead. Ava's video showed a tired, pale woman sitting alone, visibly nervous, flinching whenever someone walked past. Her hoodie had an unfamiliar logo on it, something local police couldn't place, but Reddit users did in less than 10 minutes. Turns out, the logo was tied to a now-defunct roadside motel in Idaho. And just like that, the case reopened. Let me ask you something directly, because I want you to think about this as a person, not just a viewer. If someone you knew had vanished years ago, and you randomly saw someone who looked just like them in a TikTok video, what would you do? Would you keep scrolling? Or would you hit pause and play detective? Because the person who made that comment didn't just scroll. They called someone. They spoke out. And that one action may have saved a life. This is what makes today's story more than a missing persons case. This is about community, about paying attention, about how we, as regular people, can sometimes do what even trained professionals overlook. And that's what makes this story powerful. Not just what happened to Marissa, but how she might finally be coming home, all because of social media. You're probably already feeling it, that tingle down your spine, that urge to pull the thread and see what unravels. Good. That means you're engaged. That means you're exactly where you should be right now. Because over the next few minutes, you're going to hear everything that's been uncovered so far. The newly surfaced evidence, the people involved, the dark corners of the internet that pointed investigators in the right direction, and the chilling truth behind Marissa's final walk out of that library. We'll talk to the woman who saw the TikTok and made the call. We'll hear from the retired detective who was haunted by the case for years and why he believes someone inside the town knew what happened all along. We'll even show you the side-by-side images that sparked the firestorm, so you can decide for yourself. But before we get to that, there's one thing you need to know, and it's going to change how you see this story completely. Because when Ava Walsh posted that video, she didn't know it yet, but she had been to that same diner just once before, 2 years earlier, with her family. And she remembered something odd about that trip. A woman had approached her in the restroom. Shaky. Barely able to speak. She tried to say something but stopped. All she managed to whisper was, "Don't trust the man with the ring." Ava had no idea what that meant at the time. But after the video went viral and people started connecting the dots, she realized that the woman in the restroom may have been the same one she caught on video 2 years later. And that's when this stopped being just another online mystery. Because now, there's a real question hanging in the air, one that no one has been able to answer yet. What happened to Marissa Caldwell the night she left the library, and who is the man with the ring? Marissa Caldwell wasn't the kind of girl people overlooked. Even in a small town like Brookhaven, where kids grew up together from kindergarten through high school, where rumors traveled faster than the mail, she had a quiet way of leaving a mark. She had that kind of presence, polite but assertive, gentle but impossible to ignore. She was involved in just enough to be known by everyone. Track team in the spring, school newspaper in the fall, and part-time volunteer at the animal shelter every Sunday afternoon. If you asked anyone, teachers, classmates, neighbors, they'd all describe her the same way. Sweet girl, old soul, kept to herself, but always kind. That was the image. A steady, reliable, well-behaved teenager with nothing controversial in her wake. But as police began re-examining her case after the TikTok breakthrough, a different picture started to emerge, one that hinted at quiet turbulence behind her seemingly perfect exterior. Her phone records, long buried in case archives, showed more than text to friends and homework reminders. There were late-night calls to a number that was never identified, logged at hours that suggested secrecy, 1:42 a.m., 3:08 a.m., always brief, sometimes lasting just a minute or two. When investigators dug deeper, they realized this number didn't belong to a student or teacher or a relative. It was a prepaid burner phone, registered under a fake name. Now, teenagers make mistakes, sure, but this was a girl with no history of rebellion. Her parents were stunned. They hadn't even known she had a second phone. And neither had her best friend, Jenna, who had spoken with her just hours before she vanished. Jenna told police that Marissa had been off that day, quiet, distracted, nervously checking her phone in a way she usually didn't. She hadn't said anything was wrong, but when Jenna hugged her goodbye outside the library that afternoon, she whispered, "I'll text you when I get home, okay?" That text never came. Here's where things get messy, eh? About 2 weeks before her disappearance, Marissa had a run-in with a substitute teacher named Grant Bishop. At the time, it didn't raise alarms. He was new in town, mid-30s, charming in that offbeat, slightly too personal way that some adults can be around teenagers. He only filled in for a week, then disappeared just as quietly. But when investigators reviewed school footage, they noticed something strange. On 3 separate occasions, Grant appeared to be waiting near the school parking lot well after his substitute duties had ended. No one reported anything suspicious at the time. No one saw anything inappropriate. But one clip stood out. It showed Marissa walking briskly to her car after school while Grant leaned against a nearby tree, watching. He didn't approach her. He didn't say a word. But the look on his face, the way he stayed perfectly still until she drove off, it stuck with the retired detective now brought back onto the case. Grant Bishop, it turned out, had left Brookhaven a day after Marissa vanished. No forwarding address. No social media footprint. Nothing. When TikTok sleuths began digging, they couldn't find a trace of him online. It was as if he'd been a ghost, just passing through. But not every lead pointed to strangers. Some of them pointed to people right under Marissa's roof. Her older brother, Jason, had a reputation that couldn't have been more different than hers. 2 years older, frequently in trouble, fighting, drinking, vandalism. He was what small towns like Brookhaven like to call a handful. At the time of Marissa's disappearance, Jason had recently come back home after being kicked out of college for violating the school's code of conduct. He and Marissa were close, at least on the surface. Family friends say they joked together, drove to school together when he had a car, even shared a love of indie music that most people couldn't relate to. But when detectives reopened the file, they noticed a strange coincidence. Jason had been picked up by local police just days before Marissa vanished, for trespassing near an abandoned textile warehouse on the outskirts of town. When questioned, he claimed he was just exploring. But the timing, paired with his troubled history, was too much to ignore. And more troubling still? A photo surfaced online of Jason's forearm, taken around that time, with a distinct scratch pattern that looked oddly similar to defensive wounds. And yet, every layer of the story introduced a new contradiction. A new puzzle piece that didn't quite fit. For instance, if Jason was somehow involved, why had he spent the last 9 years pushing police to keep the case active? He appeared in local news segments, spoke at vigils, even maintained a Facebook page titled Bring Marissa Home, where he posted weekly updates and memories. His grief seemed real. Too real to fake. Then again, guilt and mourning can look very similar from the outside. So what's the truth? And what about Marissa's guidance counselor, Mrs. Delaney? A well-liked woman with 2 decades of experience and a reputation for being a rock in the community. Weeks before Marissa vanished, she requested several one-on-one meetings with her. That wasn't entirely unusual. Mrs. Delaney was known for checking in on students, especially high achievers like Marissa, who were applying to top universities. But what caught investigators' attention was a note scribbled into the corner of Marissa's school-issued planner. It simply read, "Tuesday, hallway talk with Dee, don't forget." No one knows what the hallway talk was about. And Mrs. Delaney, when questioned again recently, claimed she had no memory of anything out of the ordinary. But she looked rattled. Her voice shook. Her tone changed. It was subtle, but unmistakable. And then she said something strange. Something that didn't make it into the original police transcripts, but was caught on a body cam worn by a newly assigned investigator. She whispered, "I always knew something bad was going to happen to her. I just didn't know when." The more you peel back, the more the case starts to feel like a house of mirrors, every reflection just slightly off. And now, with the TikTok video sparking fresh media coverage and amateur investigators swarming every detail, it feels like the truth is both closer and further away than ever. Some people think the woman in the video isn't Marissa at all, that it's just a random lookalike caught at the wrong time, making a strange face in bad lighting. Others are convinced it's her, especially after comparing old photos, one of which shows Marissa wearing a silver locket that looks identical to the one worn by the woman in the TikTok. That detail, of course, was noticed not by police or family, but by a 14-year-old viewer in Ohio who paused the video at exactly the right moment. And then there's the most disturbing possibility of all, the theory no one wants to say out loud. That Marissa didn't just vanish. That she was taken, groomed, held, maybe even brainwashed. And that after all these years, after all the false leads and dead ends, she's still alive but not free. That maybe, just maybe, the man with the ring isn't just a figure from a frightened woman's whispered warning, but the key to everything, the architect of her disappearance, and possibly dozens more. But there's one more detail, one more twist that's just come to light. And it's something even investigators didn't notice at first. Something buried in the TikTok's audio, beneath the ambient clatter of dishes and distant conversation. It's a voice, male, low, barely audible, but unmistakable when you isolate it. He says 5 words. Tell her the library lied. And if that's not a clue worth chasing, what is? Just as things started to move forward again, just as there was a glimmer of hope that the TikTok video might finally crack open a cold case that had haunted a town for nearly a decade, something happened that brought everything to a grinding halt. That chilling voice buried in the audio, the one that whispered, "Tell her the library lied," sparked a wave of online theories and even prompted law enforcement to re-examine the library's surveillance footage from the day Marissa disappeared. But when officials returned to the evidence locker where the original hard drives were stored, they were gone. Not corrupted, not mislabeled, completely missing. No one could explain how or when the evidence disappeared, only that it had been signed out for routine review 3 months prior by a clerk who no longer worked there, and according to their records, that person had died in a car accident shortly after. Just like that, the single most crucial piece of raw footage, which might have shown exactly what happened to Marissa that day, vanished without a trace. And suddenly, what was already a cold case began to feel like something colder. Something hidden on purpose. The library itself, once a symbol of normalcy, now took on a strange, ominous presence in the narrative. A librarian who had worked there for over 20 years came forward anonymously to a local news outlet, claiming that the original incident report filed with police didn't match what she remembered. She insisted Marissa hadn't left alone, as the report stated. She claimed she clearly remembered Marissa talking with someone in the back nonfiction aisle for nearly 30 minutes before vanishing. Someone older, a man she didn't recognize, with a strange, formal way of speaking. But when asked to testify officially, the librarian changed her story. Said she must have been mistaken. Refused to speak further. A week later, she sold her house and moved out of state, reportedly to be closer to family. But in her last social media post before deactivating her accounts, she uploaded a blurry photo of a silver ring, one that looked eerily like the one described in the TikTok caption, and simply captioned it, "He's not done." The more people started asking questions, the more strange things began happening. Jenna, Marissa's best friend, who had been the most vocal supporter of reopening the case, began receiving anonymous emails from an untraceable domain. At first, they were just unsettling. Blurry photos of Marissa taken from odd angles, emails with subject lines like, "You don't know her like you think you do." But then they escalated. One day, Jenna came home to find a Polaroid on her doorstep, a recent one, showing the outside of her house taken at night. The implication was clear. Someone was watching her. She brought it to the police, but their investigation turned up nothing. No fingerprints. No camera stores selling that particular film type in the area. When Jenna tried to go public with what was happening, her accounts were suddenly hacked. Her phone locked up. Her emails wiped clean. She stopped responding to interview requests. And quietly, she, too, began to disappear, not physically, but emotionally, pulling away from the people who cared, vanishing behind locked doors and drawn curtains, as if someone or something wanted the trail to go cold again. And then came the biggest betrayal of all. Jason Caldwell, Marissa's older brother, the one who had dedicated his life to keeping her memory alive, abruptly shut down the Bring Marissa Home Facebook page. No warning, no goodbye post, just a simple message: "It's time to let go." That stunned everyone. For years, he had been the loudest voice, the anchor for her parents, the town, even amateur sleuths online. But when local reporters tried to reach him for comment, they found that he, too, had quietly left Brookhaven, moved to Denver, changed his phone number, and declined every interview request. It was a total 180. And that's when someone noticed something deeply unsettling. A Reddit user, cross-referencing publicly available property records, discovered that Jason had recently purchased a fixer-upper cabin deep in the woods, less than 5 miles from the site of the old textile warehouse he'd been caught trespassing at years ago. A place that had been abandoned since the late 90s. When a drone hobbyist flew a camera over the cabin's property line, just trying to get a sense of the area, the footage showed something disturbing. A woman, pale, long-haired, barefoot, darting from the cabin into the trees. It was only visible for a second before she disappeared from frame. But that second changed everything. People began to question whether Jason had really been trying to solve the mystery all these years, or cover it up. Some wondered if he'd known the truth all along. Others believed he may have been manipulated too, that someone was pulling strings far deeper than any of them realized. Either way, the pressure intensified. The local sheriff's department announced that they were officially reopening the case. Again. But just as momentum began to build, another roadblock emerged. A high-level official within the department, one who had served during the original investigation, suddenly issued a gag order. No comments to the press. No updates to the family. And, according to leaked emails, a directive to cease pursuit of the social media lead. That same day, a letter appeared in Marissa's parents' mailbox. No return address, typewritten, and chillingly brief. It read, "She was never yours to find." That's when it became clear, this wasn't just about a girl who went missing anymore. It wasn't just about a cold case, or a grieving family, or a viral video that blew open old wounds. This was something bigger, more organized, more deliberate. There were people who didn't want Marissa to be found, people willing to erase evidence, intimidate witnesses, and silence voices that asked too many questions. Which brings us back to the woman in the TikTok, the one who mumbled "the man with the ring," and seemed to look right into the camera with the kind of haunted eyes only someone who's lived through something unspeakable could have. Because now, with everything that's happened, there's only one question that matters. Is she still out there trying to escape? And if she is, why is everyone trying to stop us from finding her? While the official investigation fell into silence under the weight of bureaucracy and fear, and the sheriff's office locked its doors to further questioning, a new thread began to quietly unravel the tightly wound mystery from a different angle, one that no one saw coming. Across the country, in Portland, Oregon, a woman named Ava Kendrick was scrolling through her For You page late at night when a freeze frame from the viral TikTok made her sit straight up in bed. It wasn't just a flicker of recognition. It was something deeper. That feeling you get when your brain suddenly makes a connection your conscious mind hasn't caught up to yet. It was the way the woman in the TikTok turned her head. The slight limp in her step. The scar that curved just above her eyebrow. Ava didn't know Marissa Delgado, but she knew someone who looked nearly identical, and she had the photos to prove it. 5 years ago, Ava had worked at a trauma recovery shelter in Eugene, and during one particularly harsh winter, a young woman was brought in by a state social worker, bruised, shaken, nearly mute. No name, no ID, just a backpack, a spiral notebook filled with scribbles, and a silver ring she refused to take off. She only stayed at the shelter for 9 days. On the 10th, she vanished during a fire drill. No one filed a missing persons report because, legally, no one knew who she was. But Ava had always remembered her. And now, all these years later, there she was, staring out from behind a TikTok filter, her mouth moving in slow motion, whispering secrets that clearly weren't meant to be shared. Ava tried to reach out to authorities in Brookhaven, but her emails were ignored, and the one phone call that connected was cut short before she could explain. Frustrated, she posted her own TikTok, breaking down everything she remembered about the girl from the shelter. Except this time, instead of gaining traction, the video was quickly flagged and taken down for violating community safety policies. Her account was suspended the next day. That's when she knew she wasn't just dealing with a memory or a coincidence. Someone was actively trying to keep this buried. She turned to the only person she trusted, her older brother, Dylan, a freelance photojournalist who had spent the last few years chasing dangerous stories along the southern border. Dylan had contacts, drones, and a growing archive of footage from abandoned properties and fringe communities that weren't visible on Google Maps. When she showed him the TikTok and the ring, he froze. Not because of the woman's face, but because of the location in the background. The same rundown feed store in rural Georgia he had photographed 6 months earlier during a completely unrelated investigation into a compound known for trafficking and re-education activities. The property had ties to a now-defunct church that had once promised cleansing through isolation. According to Dylan's footage, the compound had recently been repopulated. New fencing, fresh tire tracks, and in one still frame, buried in the corner of a wide drone shot, there was a single red scarf blowing in the wind, just like the one Marissa was last seen wearing the day she left the library. This revelation exploded everything wide open. If Marissa had been seen in Oregon, and then again in Georgia, years apart, hundreds of miles away, then nothing about the original story could be trusted. Not the idea that she had simply walked off, not the timeline, not the supposed sightings in local parks or bus stations. And if multiple women who resembled Marissa were showing up in shelters with no IDs and strange behavior patterns, it suggested something much darker, something systemic. Human trafficking suddenly became part of the conversation, as did cult activity, memory erasure, and psychological conditioning. But with every new possibility came more fear. Because just as Ava and Dylan started building a case file and preparing to publish a full exposé through Dylan's press contacts, their hotel room in Atlanta was broken into. Their laptops were left untouched, but the external hard drives containing all of Dylan's footage were gone. Even more disturbing, when Ava opened her backpack the next morning, the silver ring was inside, even though she'd left it in her storage unit back home. A folded note was tucked inside the ring. "You already know too much. Stop now." Back in Brookhaven, Marissa's mother received a package with no return address. Inside was a copy of her daughter's childhood diary, the one that had gone missing during a burglary years earlier. Most of the pages were blank or torn out, but one section had been carefully preserved. In a shaky hand, a 12-year-old Marissa had written about the man who follows me when I go to the library. She described him as tall, soft-spoken, always wearing gloves, and smelling like bleach. She said he once told her, "You were chosen, not stolen." That diary entry had never been part of the original police report. Either it was intentionally withheld, or someone had destroyed the evidence early on. Either way, it painted a terrifying picture that Marissa might have been groomed or marked long before the day she vanished. That someone had been planning this for years. And if that was true, then everything her family had believed, their faith in the original investigation, in law enforcement, in the idea that she might have just lost her way, crumbled into ash. People began to wonder if even Jason Caldwell's abrupt disappearance wasn't what it seemed. What if he wasn't hiding the truth to protect himself? What if he'd found something that made him realize he was in danger too? Or worse, what if he'd been lured into the same trap Marissa had been caught in all those years ago? That theory gained even more momentum when a local hiker uploaded GoPro footage from an overgrown trail near the cabin Jason had purchased. At the 14-minute mark, just before the camera glitched out, a man in a navy hooded jacket stepped into frame for a fraction of a second. He wasn't facing the camera, but based on his build, gait, and even the curve of his ear, online sleuths were convinced it was Jason. The strangest part wasn't his presence, it was the fact that he was holding a lantern. In broad daylight. Now, with every new piece of the puzzle making the original picture even harder to understand, one thing is becoming terrifyingly clear. This mystery doesn't just stretch across towns and states. It stretches across time. Across generations. There's something ancient in it, almost ritualistic. Something that doesn't want to be exposed. And the closer people get to the truth, the more violently it seems to push back. So the question isn't just what happened to Marissa anymore. It's whether we can handle what happens if we finally find out. They hadn't even reached the city limits when Ava knew they were being followed. It wasn't the car itself, black sedans were common enough, but the rhythm of its movement. Every lane switch Dylan made, it mirrored with mechanical precision. Every time they slowed for a turn or lingered at a yellow light, it did the same, holding back just far enough to not raise suspicion from someone less paranoid. But Ava wasn't guessing. She felt it in her chest, the way you feel a lie before you hear it spoken aloud. Her body knew something was wrong, even if her mind was still trying to play catch-up. Dylan tried to brush it off, called it post-trauma nerves, told her she was just rattled after what happened at the hotel. But as they pulled into a rest stop just outside Macon, Georgia, she told him plainly, "If you don't see it now, you're not going to make it through this." The rest stop was empty. Too empty for the middle of the day. One pickup truck sat idling with its headlights on in the far corner of the lot, the cab windows tinted to the point of being opaque. Dylan went to use the bathroom while Ava stayed near the vending machines, pretending to scroll through her phone while discreetly watching the black sedan ease in behind them and park on the far side of the lot. It didn't feel like coincidence anymore. Not after the hotel. Not after the stolen footage. And not after finding the ring placed back in her own bag with a note that felt like it had been written by someone watching her even now. Then something small, almost forgettable, shattered her last bit of composure. As she turned away from the vending machine, her phone buzzed with a new text message from an unknown number. Just 4 words. "You were warned, Ava." It wasn't just threatening, it was personal. Whoever had sent that message hadn't guessed her name. They hadn't pulled it off her Instagram or pieced it together from Reddit comments. They knew her.
Knew what she was doing.
Knew where she was standing at that exact moment. She turned to shout for Dylan, but he wasn't outside. Panic surged through her as she darted toward the restrooms, her voice cracking with urgency as she called his name again and again. No answer. She pounded on the door to the men's room, her heart hammering against her ribs. When she pushed it open, it was empty. Dylan was gone. The stall doors swung lazily, one faucet still dripping into the sink like a ticking clock. Her brother had vanished in broad daylight, in under 3 minutes, without a sound. Ava ran back outside, adrenaline now overriding every rational thought she had. The black sedan was gone too. So was the pickup truck. The entire rest stop felt like a ghost town that had never been alive to begin with. She got in the car and locked the doors, forcing herself to breathe as she gripped the steering wheel with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. Tears welled to her eyes, not just from fear but from the crushing realization that whatever they had stumbled into wasn't just dangerous, it was designed to erase people. Quietly.
Quickly.
With surgical precision. And she was now completely alone. This wasn't about coincidence anymore. It wasn't just about Marissa vanishing. It was about Ava herself. Somehow, she had been woven into this story before she even knew it existed. Her own belongings were turning up in surveillance footage from years prior. Her movements were being echoed, mirrored, manipulated.
But how? Why?
She remembered Dylan's words. "I had to lie to you. About everything." Suddenly, the pieces didn't fit the same way anymore. What if this wasn't a simple missing person case? What if it wasn't about Marissa at all, but about drawing Ava in, making her feel like she was in control when all along she was being guided, her every move predicted, even engineered. And then came the final blow, an email notification on her screen. An old message, dated 3 years before Marissa vanished, just resurfaced in her inbox. The subject line read, "Welcome to the program." She drove. No destination, just miles. Long stretches of interstate where the trees all started to blur together, and every highway sign felt like it was pointing nowhere. She didn't stop again until she reached a cheap roadside motel in Alabama. She checked in under a fake name, used a prepaid Visa gift card she'd kept for emergencies, and blocked the door with a chair once inside. Only then did she allow herself to fall apart. Her thoughts spiraled like an engine overheating. Had Dylan been taken? Or had he run? Did he know something she didn't? Had he been working both sides the whole time? That seed of doubt poisoned her faster than she expected. That's how they win, she thought, by making you question even the people closest to you. That's the real weapon, not fear. Isolation. She opened her laptop, desperate for a lifeline, and found that her Wi-Fi had connected automatically to a network called "Welcome Back, Ava." She stared at the name for a long time, hoping it was some bizarre coincidence. It wasn't. The second she opened her browser, a video started playing on its own. No play button. No link. Just a dimly lit room and a close-up of someone wearing a mask. Not a horror movie mask or a grotesque disguise. A realistic one. Skim-like. Almost human. The voice behind it was distorted, yet oddly calm. "We told you not to come back," it said. "We were merciful once. We won't be again." Then the screen cut to black. The message wasn't just a threat, it was a promise. And Ava knew, with gut-wrenching certainty, that she had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. But what terrified her more was that none of it made any logical sense. If this was about Marissa, then why target her now? Why erase Dylan? Why feed her tiny breadcrumbs of the truth only to yank them away with cruel precision? Was it all a trap from the beginning? Was the viral TikTok that started it all not a clue, but bait? The questions piled up like bodies. And the answers, if they even existed, were hidden beneath layers of fear, betrayal, and silence. She felt hunted, watched, and worst of all, chosen. The motel room had become a prison of silence, every second stretching out like a blade across Ava's nerves. She hadn't eaten, hadn't slept, hadn't stopped pacing since that haunting video played across her laptop screen. Her mind was spiraling, caught in a web of half-truths and unanswered questions. And just when she thought the pressure couldn't build any higher, her burner phone, one she'd bought just days ago and hadn't given to anyone, rang. Not a text. Not a notification. A full-on call. No caller ID. Her stomach dropped. With trembling fingers, she answered it, expecting another threat or distorted warning. But instead, a familiar voice came through the static. It was Dylan. But something was wrong. His voice was low, almost robotic, as if he were reading from a script. "Ava, listen to me carefully. Don't ask questions. Don't try to trace this. They're watching everything. I couldn't tell you before. I didn't know how deep it went." Ava's heart was racing now, thudding against her ribs like a war drum. "They? Who are you talking about? Where are you?" But he ignored her questions, continued speaking in that lifeless, flat tone. "I had to lie to you. About everything. Marissa, she's not who you think she is. She didn't disappear. She left. And it wasn't random." Before she could respond, a new voice cut in, male, calm, completely unfamiliar. "We warned you, Ava. You should have stayed out of this." And then the line went dead. Ava collapsed onto the motel bed, the phone slipping from her hands like it had burned her. Her brother had just confessed to hiding the truth, and then someone else had hijacked the call. Nothing made sense anymore. Her thoughts were spiraling so fast she could barely breathe. But one word kept echoing in her head. Left. Marissa left? Why would Dylan say that? Everything pointed to her being kidnapped. The dashcam footage, the TikTok, the wedding ring, the shadowy messages, it all screamed abduction. But now Ava was being told Marissa had chosen to vanish? She tore through her backpack, desperate to find the original USB she had hidden in a secret lining of her jacket. It held the original TikTok download, the raw footage, something she'd kept offline as a backup in case everything else was taken. She plugged it into her laptop and paused the video at the exact second Marissa walked past the library camera, same moment she always disappeared behind the hedge. But this time, Ava saw something she hadn't noticed before. A reflection. In the glass window across the street, barely visible unless you slowed the frame to a crawl. Marissa wasn't alone. There was someone already waiting behind that hedge. Someone wearing the exact same hoodie Ava had packed in her suitcase 2 weeks ago. Her blood went cold. She clicked it open. No sender. No signature. Just one line of text and an attachment. The message read, "It always starts with the library. Watch closely." And the attachment? A short video. Grainy surveillance footage. Of Ava, at age 17, entering the exact same library Marissa disappeared from. Wearing the same hoodie. Walking the same path. And in the final second before the clip ended, she vanished behind the same hedge. Everything she thought she knew had just crumbled beneath her. Ava sat frozen in the darkness of the motel room, the faint glow of her laptop screen casting long, haunted shadows on the walls. Her breath was shallow, her heart pounding so hard it felt like it would crack her ribs. The video on her screen replayed over and over, confirming what she didn't want to believe. She had been there. Not just at the same library, but at the exact location Marissa vanished, years before it ever happened. She didn't remember it. She didn't remember any of it. But the timestamp on the footage was clear, and so was the reflection of her teenage face in the window. It was her. Same eyes. Same awkward posture. Same hoodie. And yet she had no memory of that day. None. As she stared at the screen, her thoughts spiraled into a new territory, one she had avoided out of pure fear. What if this isn't about finding Marissa anymore? What if this is about finding out who I really am? The next morning, her burner phone buzzed again. A text this time. No number. No contact info. Just a location and a time. Emerson Bridge. For PM, come alone. Or you'll never get the answers. There was no signature, no explanation. Ava stared at the message, her mind already spinning with possible setups. It could be a trap. It felt like a trap. But she knew she'd go anyway. She had to. Because if someone was threatening to keep her from the truth, then that meant someone knew it. And that was more dangerous than anything else. But before she left, she needed to confront the one person she still hadn't questioned, Dylan. She didn't warn him she was coming. She didn't want to give him a chance to prepare another lie. She found him in his old apartment, back in their hometown, in the same dimly lit living room they'd grown up in. Everything smelled like memory, pine cleaner and dusty books and Sunday morning coffee. Dylan was startled when she walked in, but not surprised. Like he'd been expecting this conversation to come crashing through the door. "You saw it, didn't you?" he asked quietly. "The footage." Ava felt sick. "Why didn't you tell me? That I was there? That I was part of it?" Dylan couldn't look her in the eyes. "Because it wasn't supposed to be you. It wasn't ever supposed to come back to you. We tried to bury it. I begged them to erase everything. Your name, your face, the timestamp," his voice cracked. "But they didn't. They archived it. You were a kid, Ava. You don't remember because they took those memories." Her blood ran cold. "Who are they?" she demanded, her voice shaking. "What is the program? Why are they using me like some kind of puppet?" Dylan hesitated too long. That pause was his answer. He knew more, much more, and he was still holding back. That's when Ava made the hardest decision of her life. She reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a tiny recorder she had been carrying since this all started. She hit play. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "But if you won't tell me the truth willingly, I'll find another way to get it out." Dylan's face changed.
Panic.
Anger. Betrayal. "You're recording me now," he snapped. "You don't know what you're playing with, Ava. These people, they don't forgive. If you keep pushing this, you'll disappear too. Just like she did." But Ava was already halfway out the door. She had no intention of stopping. Whatever the program was, whatever secrets Dylan was trying to protect, it was clear now that he wasn't on her side anymore. And maybe he never had been. As she drove toward Emerson Bridge, the weight of her choices crashed over her. She had no allies left. No safety net. She could walk away from all of it. Burn the footage, destroy the phone, disappear under a new name, and try to build a life somewhere far from this nightmare. Or she could show up at that bridge, alone, like the message said, and step deeper into the darkness. There was no in-between. Either she chose survival, or she chose the truth. But not both. By the time she pulled up near the bridge, the sun was dipping below the trees, casting long shadows across the pavement. The air was thick with silence. No cars. No people. Just one figure in the distance, standing still on the edge of the bridge's walkway. Ava's breath caught in her throat. She recognized the figure. It was Marissa. Or at least, it looked like her. But when the woman turned around, Ava realized with bone-deep horror. It wasn't Marissa at all. It was herself. Ava's breath caught as she stared at the figure on the bridge, her own face staring back at her. The woman mirrored her movements, her expression unreadable, as if Ava were looking into a distorted mirror reflecting a version of herself she didn't recognize. The air was thick with tension, the silence between them louder than any scream. Ava took a tentative step forward, her mind racing with questions that had no answers. But before she could speak, the woman turned and disappeared into the shadows, leaving Ava alone with the chilling realization that the mystery was far deeper than she had ever imagined. Determined to uncover the truth, Ava delved into the depths of the program's secrets. She hacked into encrypted files, piecing together fragments of information that painted a horrifying picture. The program wasn't just an experiment. It was a vast network of psychological manipulation, targeting individuals like Ava and Marissa, erasing their identities and replacing them with fabricated personas. The goal was control, to create perfect subjects who would carry out missions without question, their memories altered to fit the program's needs. As Ava dug deeper, she discovered a list of names, people who had vanished without a trace, their lives rewritten or erased entirely. Among them was her own name, listed as Subject 47. The files detailed her recruitment, the memory implants, the staged encounters, all orchestrated to manipulate her into uncovering the program's secrets, only to be silenced once she got too close. The realization hit her like a tidal wave. She had been a pawn in a game she didn't even know she was playing. The betrayal cut deeper when she discovered that Dylan, her own brother, was listed as an operative, assigned to monitor and guide her actions. His disappearance, the cryptic messages, it had all been part of the plan to keep her on the path the program had designed. But something had gone wrong. Ava had deviated from the script, and now she was a liability. Faced with the truth, Ava knew she had to make a choice: continue down the rabbit hole and risk losing herself entirely, or fight back against the program and reclaim her identity. The weight of the decision pressed down on her, but she knew one thing for certain: she wouldn't be a puppet any longer. With steely determination, Ava set out to dismantle the program from within, knowing that the path ahead would be fraught with danger and uncertainty. But she was ready to face whatever came next, to uncover the full extent of the conspiracy and bring those responsible to justice. As she disappeared into the night, Ava couldn't shake the feeling that the true battle was just beginning and that the shadows held secrets even darker than she could imagine. Ava stood at the edge of the abandoned control room, the air thick with the hum of dormant machinery and the scent of rust and decay. The walls, once pristine, were now adorned with faded schematics and cryptic symbols that seemed to pulse with a life of their own. She had followed the trail of clues, each more perplexing than the last, leading her to this forsaken place that held the answers she so desperately sought. The weight of her journey bore down on her shoulders, but she knew that the truth lay just beyond the next door. As she pushed open the heavy metal door, the room beyond was bathed in an eerie blue light emanating from a massive screen that dominated the far wall. Rows of monitors flickered to life, displaying images of people, some familiar, others strangers, all connected by a web of data points and timelines. At the center of it all was a name: Project Echo. Ava's breath caught in her throat as she realized the magnitude of the operation. This wasn't just about her or Marissa. It was a sprawling network of manipulated lives, each thread meticulously woven into a tapestry of control and deception. A voice echoed through the chamber, smooth and calculated. "Welcome, Ava. You've come further than any of the others." From the shadows emerged a figure she recognized all too well: Dylan. Her heart pounded as conflicting emotions surged within her: betrayal, confusion, and a lingering hope that this was all a misunderstanding. But the coldness in his eyes extinguished any remnants of that hope. "Why?" she demanded, her voice trembling. "Why would you do this to me? To all of us?" Dylan's expression remained impassive. "It was never personal, Ava. You were chosen because of your resilience, your ability to adapt. Project Echo needed someone like you to test the boundaries of our simulations." He gestured to the screens. "Each of these individuals played their part, but you were the linchpin." Ava's mind reeled. Simulations? None of this was real. He nodded. Real enough to elicit genuine responses. Emotions, decisions, consequences, they all served to refine our algorithms. Your reactions provided invaluable data. The room seemed to close in around her as the weight of his words settled. Every memory, every choice, every moment of anguish had been orchestrated for the sake of an experiment. Her fists clenched as a surge of determination coursed through her. "I won't be your puppet any longer." Masterclass. Dylan's gaze hardened. You always had a choice, Ava. But choices have consequences. He pressed a button on a nearby console, and the screen shifted to display a countdown. This facility will self-destruct in 5 minutes. Consider it the final phase of the experiment. Panic threatened to overtake her, but Ava forced herself to think. She scanned the room, her eyes landing on a terminal labeled Override. With seconds to spare, she raced to the console, her fingers flying over the keyboard as she attempted to abort the countdown. Access denied. She tried again, this time inputting a sequence she remembered from a previous clue. Access granted. The countdown halted, and the room fell silent. Dylan's expression shifted from confidence to disbelief. Impossible, he whispered. Ava turned to face him, a newfound strength in her stance. You underestimated me. Suddenly, the monitors flickered, and a new image appeared, a live feed of another facility, identical to the one she was in. Inside, another Ava stood before a console, mirroring her actions. The realization hit her like a tidal wave. She wasn't the only one. Project Echo had multiple iterations, each testing different variables, each with their own Ava. As the screen faded to black, a final message appeared. Phase 1 complete. Preparing for integration. Ava's world shattered anew as she grasped the true scale of the conspiracy. This was only the beginning. Ava stood alone on the rooftop of the abandoned facility, the cold wind whipping through her hair as she gazed out over the city. The skyline shimmered with artificial lights, a stark contrast to the darkness that had enveloped her life for so long. The revelations of Project Echo had shattered her reality, but in the aftermath, she had found a strange sense of clarity. The pieces of the puzzle had fallen into place, revealing a truth more complex and insidious than she could have imagined. She had uncovered the full extent of the program's reach, its tendrils woven into every facet of society. The simulations, the manipulations, the erasure of identities, all orchestrated to maintain control and suppress dissent. But Ava had disrupted their plans, exposing the cracks in their facade and igniting a spark of resistance. The data she had retrieved was now in the hands of journalists, activists, and truth seekers, spreading like wildfire across the internet. As she descended the stairs, her thoughts turned to Dylan. His betrayal had cut deep, but she couldn't help but wonder if there was still a part of him that regretted his actions. Perhaps he had been a victim of the program as well, manipulated and coerced into compliance. She would never know for sure, but she chose to believe that redemption was possible, even for him. In the days that followed, Ava found herself drawn to the people who had been affected by the program. Survivors, like herself, who had been stripped of their identities and forced to live lives that were not their own. Together, they formed a support network, sharing their stories and helping each other reclaim their sense of self. It was a slow and painful process, but it was also a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. One evening, as she sat in a quiet cafe, Ava received a message on her phone. It was a video, sent from an unknown number. She hesitated for a moment before pressing play. The screen flickered to life, revealing a familiar face, her own. But this version of Ava was different. She was seated in a sterile room, her expression vacant, her eyes devoid of emotion. A voice off-camera asked her a series of questions, and she responded in a monotone, reciting information as if reading from a script. The video ended abruptly, leaving Ava staring at her reflection in the darkened screen. A chill ran down her spine as she realized the implications. The program was still active, still creating versions of her, still conducting experiments. Her fight was far from over. But she was no longer alone. She had allies, people who believed in her cause, people who were willing to stand up against the darkness. Together, they would continue to expose the truth, to dismantle the program piece by piece, until every last remnant was destroyed. As she stepped out into the night, Ava felt a renewed sense of purpose. The road ahead would be fraught with challenges, but she was ready to face them. She had reclaimed her identity, her agency, and her voice. And she would use them to shine a light into the shadows, to ensure that no one else would suffer as she had. The story of Project Echo was far from over, but Ava was determined to write the next chapter on her own terms.